Welcome to The Deep Dive, the only place where we take the sources you share with us and turn them into a clear, fascinating understanding of the biggest topics in history. Today, we are deep diving into a figure whose creative output is, well, universally recognized. A man synonymous with childhood fantasy and massive corporate success. Yet his personal life and character remain shrouded in, frankly, incredibly complex history and significant controversy. Walter Elias Disney.
It's a essential deep dive for you, definitely. Our source material today provides a comprehensive, kind of balanced look at the man, moving beyond, the mascot and the theme parks. We're covering his ambitious career milestones, the specific technical innovations he pioneered, those profound personal contradictions, and the lasting, often polarizing cultural reputation he left behind. We are truly examining the evolution of modern mass media through the lens of, well, one man.
Absolutely, and the mission here isn't just to recount the history of animation, is it? It's about unpacking the relentless ambition of the entrepreneur, the visionary, and the man who, decades after his death, still holds the record for the most Academy Awards won by an individual. 22 competitive wins out of an astonishing 59 total nominations. I mean, that alone speaks to a level of creative impact that few can rival. Okay, let's unpack this. Right, so to truly understand the whole Disney mythology, we have to start at the beginning, trace that path from the American heartland. Walt Disney was born in Chicago in 1901. His father, Elias, was Irish and Canadian, and his mother, Flora, had German and English heritage. But the chapter that everyone agrees provided the blueprint for his sentimental, often idyllic creative vision began when he was, what, 4?
That was the move to a farm in Marceline, Missouri. Yeah. Biographers consistently point to this period as one of the happiest and most formative times of his life. It was small-town America personified, really. And this is where his artistic interest first sparked. We have records of him, as a boy, being paid to draw a neighbor's retired horse, one of his first paid artistic assignments, believe it or not.
And he wasn't just drawing horses. We know he practiced his skills by meticulously copying cartoons from the front page of the socialist newspaper of the day, Appeal to Reason. Think about that for a second. The future purveyor of American corporate enterprise learning his craft by tracing political cartoons from a socialist publication. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
It really is. That rural idyll, however, crashed headfirst into the brutal reality of urban life in 1911 when the family moved to Kansas City. It wasn't just a move. It became a daily grind that fundamentally shaped his relentless work ethic. His father purchased this massive, demanding newspaper delivery route, the Kansas City Star and Kansas City Times.
And Walt, along with his brother Roy, was basically forced into years of grueling labor. They had to wake up at 4:30 every single morning to deliver the papers before school, often battling severe winter weather, and then repeat the entire route in the evenings. Just brutal.
That exhausting schedule certainly took a severe toll on his academic life. He often received poor marks in school because, well, he couldn't keep his eyes open in class. Yet he relentlessly channeled his energy into his passion, enrolling in evening and weekend courses at the Kansas City Art Institute, desperately trying to get formal training while balancing those brutal delivery obligations. It's a profound example of ambition overriding exhaustion.
A few years later, middle of 1918, we see that ambition turn into sheer determination. He's 16, tries to join the U.S. Army to fight in World War I, but gets rejected for being underage. So what does he do? He forges the date on his birth certificate.
Right, and manages to join the Red Cross as an ambulance driver. He gets shipped to France, but the 1918 armistice had already been signed, so he actually arrived after the war officially ended.
Still driven, though.
Oh, absolutely. Even while waiting for assignment, he was illustrating. He decorated the side of his ambulance with cartoons, used the local environment as his subject, and even had some of his work published in the Army newspaper, Stars and Stripes. This was a young man constantly pushing to apply his talent, no matter the context.
So when he returns in 1919, he gets an apprentice illustrator job in Kansas City at the Pesman Rubin Commercial Art Studio. And this environment was crucial, wasn't it? Because it's where he found a pivotal lifelong collaborator, the fellow artist Ub Iwerks.
Exactly. Now, their first self-started venture, Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists, that was pretty short-lived. But they soon found stability working at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, which produced commercials using a very rudimentary animation technique called cutout animation. This is where the true pivot happened.
Precisely. Disney realized the potential of animation, but he hated the cheap, choppy look of the cutout method. He borrowed a camera and a book on animation, and essentially taught himself the craft in his own time. He became convinced that the future was in cell animation drawing characters onto clear sheets of celluloid over static backgrounds. because it allowed for much smoother, superior movement.
Right, and when he couldn't convince his boss at Film Adco to upgrade the process, he just walked away and started his own venture, which eventually became Lafogram's studio in 1921. He brought several key early animators with him, including iWorks, of course. They produced modernized fairy tales called Newman's Lafograms.
They were ambitious. I mean, they even produced Alice's Wonderland, which daringly combined live action with animation, turning a real girl into a cartoon world. That was pretty cutting edge for the time. But despite the talent and the intense effort, the studio just couldn't find a reliable funding stream and went into bankruptcy in 1923. That's a massive failure for a 21-year-old.
Right. Absolutely. Bankrupt. So Disney moved to Hollywood in July 1923, initially hoping, ironically enough, to become a live-action film director. The only reason he really moved there was that his older brother Roy was already in Los Angeles recovering from tuberculosis. His only asset was that last failed short, Alice's Wonderland.
So he managed to secure a distributor in New York, Margaret Winkler, who needed content after losing rights to popular series like Felix the Cat. This led to the formation of the Disney Brothers Studio, the direct predecessor of the Walt Disney Company we know today. They found immediate success with the Alice comedies. But then came the great corporate ambush.
Yes, the Oswald crisis. In 1927, they created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit for Universal Pictures, and the character quickly became a sensation, a big hit. Disney traveled to New York in 1928, expecting, to negotiate a higher fee based on Oswald's popularity. And here's the first great, painful lesson in intellectual property law for him.
Yeah, he arrived only to find that Winkler's husband, Charles Mintz, was essentially running a sting operation. Mintz not only intended to slash payments, but had already secretly poached nearly the entire animation staff, all the artists Disney had trained and relied on, including future legends like Fred Harmon.
It was devastating. The realization was that Disney did not own Oswald. Universal, the distributor, did. Mintz offered Disney a reduced salary to become an employee working on his own character. Can you imagine? Disney refused the ultimatum and the pay cuts, left New York devastated, and lost everyone except Ub Iwerks, who famously remained loyal. He had created a star and an entire studio system only to have it completely taken away overnight.
What stands out to me here, though, is that this single moment, the betrayal, the loss of Oswald, became arguably the most critical business catalyst of his entire life. He learned, right then and there, that without owning the intellectual property, nothing else mattered.
Absolutely. That loss, that feeling on the train ride back from New York, forced an immediate act of creation. Disney had to develop a new character that he and only he would own. This was the moment Mickey Mouse was born.
Now, there are slightly conflicting tales about the specific inspiration, maybe a pet mouse at the Laugh-O-Gram studio, maybe something else. But we know the original name Walt settled on was Mortimer Mouse.
Mortimer Mouse. Yeah, it was his wife, Lillian, who famously vetoed it. She apparently called the name too pompous, suggesting the friendlier name Mickey instead. Good call, Lillian.
Definitely a better ring to it.
And Ub Iwerks, demonstrating his loyalty and incredible speed, immediately helped refine Disney's early sketches, simplifying the design to make the character efficient to animate. While Iwerks handled the physical design, as one employee noted, Walt gave him his soul. And for the next 2 decades until 1947, Walt himself provided Mickey's distinct falsetto voice.
So they quickly produced 2 shorts, Plain Crazy and The Gallopin' Gaucho, but they were silent films, and they actually failed to find distribution in the changing market. Disney was, however, keenly observant of the success of films like The Jazz Singer. He realized sound wasn't just a gimmick, it was the future.
So he took a colossal risk on the 3rd short, Steamboat Willie, in 1928. This short was designed specifically for synchronized sound, making it the first cartoon to use post-produced sound. He secured a deal for this Cinephone recording system, and the short was an immediate sensational hit. It made Mickey Mouse an international star almost instantly, fundamentally because of the sound innovation, not just the drawing.
And the innovation didn't stop there. He hired Carl Stalling, a professional composer who suggested developing an entirely new series, The Silly Symphonies. The concept was pretty radical for the time. Shorts where the music and sound weren't just secondary, but primary. The stories were told through the score. This started with The Skeleton Dance in 1929.
The next huge technical leap was color. Disney understood that in a competitive market, you needed an exclusive advantage. He managed to negotiate a crucial deal, giving him the sole right to use the full-color, 3-strip Technicolor process in animation until August 1935. This was a crippling advantage over every other studio for 3 crucial years. Think about that.
Huge. The first short using this process was Flowers and Trees in 1932. It was a massive visual success and won the inaugural Academy Award for Best Short Subject Cartoon. You can see the competitive edge right there. While rivals were stuck in black and white or maybe clunky two-color processes, Disney was creating these lush, vibrant worlds. He used that advantage perfectly.
By the mid-30s, the studio was expanding its roster, introducing other enduring stars. Pluto in 1930, Goofy in 1932, and of course Donald Duck in 1934. Disney also recognized that great animation required great storytelling, not just clever gags. He created a dedicated story department, where storyboard artists focused purely on plotting emotionally resonant narratives, really moving the medium beyond simple visual jokes.
But even with successful shorts, like The Three Little Pigs in 1933, which won another Oscar and became this huge cultural phenomenon, that song was everywhere. Disney felt restricted. He set his sights on the feature film, an idea considered pure madness at the time.
That feature film was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When the project was announced, industry veterans, even his own brother Roy, dismissed it as Disney's folly. They were convinced a full-length cartoon would bore audiences and bankrupt the studio. But Disney saw it as necessary validation and, well, evolution.
And the cost certainly justified the fear. It took 4 years of intense labor and ultimately cost $1.5 million, which was like 3 times the original budget. To put that in perspective, that was truly a bet the farm amount of money for a studio of that size back then.
The massive cost was a direct consequence of Disney's obsession with realism. He insisted that if they were going to ask audiences to suspend disbelief for 90 minutes, the animation had to be flawless. He paid for his animators to attend night classes at the Chouinard Art Institute, and famously, he brought live animals, deer, birds, even a horse, and live actors right into the studio, so the animators could study realistic movement and anatomical structure, really intense focus on detail.
This quest for realism led to perhaps their most significant technical invention, the multiplane camera. Before this, animation was just flat, like you said, like a stack of pancakes. The multiplane camera solved that fundamental problem.
It was ingenious, really. Instead of drawing on a single flat surface, artists placed drawings on multiple glass panes arranged at various distances from the lens. By moving those layers incrementally at different speeds, the camera created this unparalleled illusion of true depth, perspective change, and dimension, enabling the emotional immersion needed for a major feature film. It debuted in the short The Old Mill in 1937, which, surprise, surprise, promptly won an Academy Award.
Snow White premiered in December 1937, and the reaction was explosive, just huge. It was a massive critical success and became the most successful sound film made up to that date. It solidified the beginning of the golden age of animation. Disney received another special honorary Academy Award for it, too. That truly unique prize consisting of 1 full-sized and 7 miniature Oscar statuettes representing Snow White and the Dwarfs. Iconic.
Yeah. Yet, despite the triumph, the financial picture darkened almost immediately. The next 2 features, Pinocchio and Fantasia, both released in 1940, underperformed drastically at the box office. Crucially, the European market, which generated essential revenue for them, was cut off due to the escalating war in Europe.
This failure threw the studio into deep debt, and the internal environment deteriorated quickly. Financial stress led to heavy salary cuts, and when combined with Disney's notoriously high standards and, let's be honest, often insensitive paternalistic management style, it exploded into a 5-week animator strike in 1941.
This labor conflict was not a minor incident. It was a permanent and traumatic turning point for the studio, leading to the departure of many key artists. Interestingly, during the height of the negotiations with the federal mediator, Disney himself was absent. He took a U.S. government-sponsored goodwill trip to South America, which later inspired the films Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros. His absence, though, it cemented the strain on his relationships with some of his staff forever. Big rift. Right, so when the United States formally entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, the studio underwent a complete metamorphosis. It was repurposed almost entirely for the war effort, focusing on instruction, training, and propaganda films for the military. This work was vital, of course, but it generated only cost-covering revenue, not the massive profits needed to keep a major studio liquid.
The range of output was staggering, wasn't it? On one hand, you have these highly technical instruction films, like 4 Methods of Flush Riveting, designed to teach factory workers complex assembly techniques. On the other hand, they produced morale boosters and propaganda like the Donald Duck shorts promoting war bonds and the really powerful Oscar-winning propaganda short Der Fuhrer's Face.
Simultaneously, the features they did manage to release struggled financially. Bambi, which debuted in 1942, underperformed significantly at the box office and resulted in a $200,000 loss. The studio found itself in existential financial trouble, owing the Bank of America something like $4 million by 1944. Huge debt.
That's a sum that could easily have sunk the company. What saved Disney wasn't a feature film, it turns out, but the faith of one man. Amedeo Gianni, the founder of the Bank of America. Apparently, his executives were ready to foreclose, but Gianni famously told them that the Disneys were a long-term investment and that they should basically relax and give them time to market their product.
Okay.
It was Gianni's personal intervention that allowed the studio to survive WWII intact. Incredible.
It really is. Post-war, the emphasis shifted again. Roy Disney, always the financial pragmatist, pushed for diversification. They moved toward combining live-action and animation features, as well as producing entirely live-action films like Treasure Island and much later the massive hit Mary Poppins.
They also found great commercial success exploring a totally new frontier, the nature film. In 1948, Disney initiated the hugely popular True Life Adventure series. This was pretty innovative, capturing the public's imagination with real wildlife footage in stunning detail. The first short, Seal Island, immediately won an Academy Award.
It wasn't until 1950 that pure animated features made their grand return, marking a turning point. Cinderella was the studio's first full animated feature in 8 years. It cost $2.2 million, but demonstrated the brand's resilience by earning nearly $8 million in its initial year. It was a massive commercial statement that, yes, animation still mattered.
With the animation pipeline kind of stabilized again, Disney began to delegate the day-to-day operations of the animation studio more. He transferred responsibility to his trusted inner circle of key animators, collectively known as the 9 Old Men. This was the core creative brain trust that would guide Disney animation for the next 3 decades.
This delegation was critical because it freed him up to focus on the next great leap, Disneyland. But before that, he made sure he had total corporate control. Around this time, he established his own distribution division, Buena Vista, replacing RKO Pictures. This move gave the company complete control over its creative scheduling and financial pipeline, meaning no outside distributor could ever take his content or intellectual property again. He wasn't going through another Oswald crisis.
Right, the ultimate paradigm shift for the Disney brand. The move from film studio to, well, leisure empire began with a simple personal need, didn't it? Disney often visited local parks in Los Angeles, like Griffith Park, with his young daughters and found them generally run down or dirty. He longed for a clean, safe, shared experience where both children and parents could have fun together.
His inspiration was very specific. The cleanliness, the organization, the whole atmosphere of the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, which he had visited. He realized that to create this vision, he couldn't use traditional studio funding because the shareholders would never support such a massive, unproven project. Too risky.
So he took another big risk, utilizing his personal funds to form WED Enterprises, which we now know as Walt Disney Imagineering, to design and build the park. He hired the designers who would later be affectionately known as the Imagineers. After securing crucial outside financing, including that key deal with ABC Television, construction began in Anaheim, California.
Disneyland opened in July 1955. The opening itself was an absolute spectacle, broadcast live on television, watched by 70 million viewers. An audience share unheard of today. The park was designed as a series of themed lands: Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, all converging on Main Street, USA.
And that Main Street detail is so telling, isn't it? It wasn't just generic Americana. It was a physical replica of the Main Street in his cherished childhood home of Marceline, Missouri, solidifying that deep nostalgic connection to his past right there in the park's design. The success was immediate.
Despite the famous minor hiccups on opening day, asphalt melting, rides breaking down, the park was immediately overwhelmed, attracting 3.6 million guests in its first year alone. The financial architecture of the park was brilliant, too. The funding ABC provided for the park's construction was contingent on Disney providing them with exclusive television programming. It was a perfect synergy. ABC funded the construction, and the resulting TV shows provided instant, nationwide marketing for the park. Genius.
It was an incredible expansion right into the living room. The Walt Disney's Disneyland Anthology show, which began in 1954, was an immediate massive success, often pulling in an audience share exceeding 50%. That's huge. This was followed by the first daily show, The Mickey Mouse Club, which became a cultural force and led to unprecedented levels of character merchandising. T-shirts, lunchboxes, everything.
This combination of park, production, and promotion created these huge cultural moments. The 5-part Davy Crockett miniseries segment, which aired within the Disneyland Anthology, became an overnight sensation. The coonskin cap craze swept the nation, and the theme song, The Ballad of Davy Crockett, sold 10 million records. $10 million, leading Disney to form yet another separate entity for music distribution, Disneyland Records. He was building an empire piece by piece.
And while running this burgeoning empire, he maintained a very high-profile public presence. He chaired the pageantry committee for the 1960 Winter Olympics, designing the opening and closing ceremonies. He contributed to the 1959 Moscow Fair with America the Beautiful, that 360-degree circorama film. He even collaborated with the NASA rocketry legend Wernher von Braun on the Disneyland episode Man in Space.
But his final, truly immense project began in the mid-1960s with the massive, secret acquisition of land in Florida for what would become Disney World. This wasn't merely meant to be a bigger version of the park in Anaheim, though. The true heart of this venture was the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, or EPC out.
What's fascinating here, and what many people don't realize, is that the vision was not a theme park initially. Disney intended EPC out to be a literal, functional, modern corporate utopia, a continuously evolving city where people would live and work, demonstrating the height of American ingenuity and free enterprise. It was incredibly ambitious.
We can hear the intensity of that vision in his own words. He described EPCOT as a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and systems, a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise.
It was his ultimate dream of social engineering and urban planning, really.
Tragically, he wouldn't live to see any of it completed. Disney was a heavy, lifelong smoker. Unfiltered cigarettes, pipes, the works. He died of circulatory collapse due to lung cancer in December 1966 at age 65. The feature film The Jungle Book and the short Winnie the Pooh and The Blessed were released posthumously. Following Walt's death, his brother Roy deferred his own retirement to ensure the Florida park was completed, dedicating Walt Disney World to his brother's memory. A touching tribute. However, the true city vision was lost forever. The original EPCO city concept was eventually replaced by the theme park version, Epcot Center, which opened in 1982 more like a permanent World's Fair rather than a functional community. And we should probably put the long-standing, strange urban legend to rest. His daughter Diane later explicitly denied the rumor that he was cryonically frozen. He wasn't.
When you look at Disney's life, the duality of his character is perhaps the most striking element. The public adored Uncle Walt, right? The warm, grandfatherly TV host and figurehead. But privately, those who knew him consistently described him as shy, highly self-deprecating, and actually profoundly insecure.
He was keenly aware of this distinction, too. He admitted that his public image was largely a necessary facade that he felt he had to maintain for the brand. He once told a friend, apparently in a moment of candor, "I'm not Walt Disney. I do a lot of things Walt Disney would not do. Walt Disney does not smoke. I smoke. Walt Disney does not drink. I drink." He felt forced to play a role that was far more wholesome than the reality of the driven, sometimes volatile businessman he was.
And his professional standards were famously, or maybe infamously, high. His staff knew that getting a quiet "that'll work" was basically the highest praise one could receive, as he rarely offered verbal affirmation.
This is a key point when analyzing the culture of the studio back then. Instead of verbal praise, he tended to reward high-performing staff with generous financial bonuses. He kind of expected that the praise would be passed down the ranks, but this style aloof, demanding, intensely focused, is directly relevant to the 1941 labor strike and his subsequent political shift.
Right, that labor strike really seemed to cement his political transformation. He had been a Democrat until about 1940, but following the strike he switched his allegiance to the Republican Party and became deeply conservative, increasingly focused on anti-labor and anti-communist politics.
His activism culminated in the Second Red Scare. In 1947, he was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC. HUAC was, investigating alleged communist infiltration in the motion picture industry. It was a very fraught time.
And Disney testified. He named former animators and union organizers, specifically Herbert Sorrell, David Hilberman, and William Pomerantz, as communist agitators. He blamed them in what he called communistic agitation for having orchestrated the damaging 1941 strike, painting the labor action as a politically motivated attack on American enterprise. Pretty strong stuff.
He also maintained a consistent connection with the FBI, though the context here is important. He was made a special agent in charge contact in 1954, which was largely an honorary title given to useful community members. His FBI file mostly details correspondence related to the studio producing educational and instructional films for the Bureau, including an unmade short about child safety. It wasn't like he was an active agent.
Okay, now we really must impartially address the persistent and serious allegations of prejudice that has surrounded his reputation, which often frame him as either a purveyor of homely patriotic values or, conversely, a representative of American cultural imperialism. It's very polarized.
When it comes to claims of anti-Semitism, the most commonly cited evidence is that Disney offered a studio tour to the Nazi propagandist Leni Riefenstahl shortly after the violence of Kristallnacht, which, looks terrible. However, the studio later claimed she essentially crashed the gate, arriving with a party who had secured permission. Biographer Neil Gabler concludes that while Disney was certainly willing to ally himself politically with people who were anti-Semitic, the available evidence does not support the personal accusation that he himself was anti-Semitic. It's a nuanced distinction.
And there is compelling counter-evidence, isn't there? Disney was known to donate regularly to various Jewish charities. Furthermore, in 1955, he was named the Man of the Year by the B'nai B'rith chapter in Beverly Hills. And animator Joe Grant, a Jewish storyman who worked closely with Disney for years, stated emphatically he was not anti-Semitic. Some of the most influential people at the studio were Jewish.
Then there are the claims of racism. These stem primarily from films made between the 1930s and 1950s that undeniably contained racial stereotypes. Things like the character design in The Three Little Pigs, the black-colored bird in Who Killed Cock Robin, the jive-talking crows in Dumbo, the portrayal of American Indians in Peter Pan, and of course the ongoing controversy surrounding Song of the South, which the company still keeps locked away.
Biographer Gabler's nuanced assessment here is that Disney was racially insensitive, a condition common to many white people of his generation, but no racist. However, perhaps the most compelling defense against the personal charge of racism comes from his relationship with Song of the South star James Baskett, who played Uncle Remus.
That's right. Disney apparently developed a genuine and lasting friendship with Baskett during and after filming. When Baskett later fell into failing health, Disney financially supported him and his family. Crucially, Disney successfully campaigned for Baskett to receive an honorary Academy Award in 1948 for his performance, a monumental effort, as Baskett was otherwise ineligible for a competitive award at the time.
And finally, Floyd Norman, who was the studio's first black animator and worked there during the 1950s and 60s, attested to Disney's character. Norman stated clearly that he did not once observe a hint of the racist behavior Walt Disney was often accused of after his death. His treatment of people, and by this I mean all people, can only be called exemplary." End quote. So this collection of testimonies really underscores the true complexity of the man behind the icon. It's not black and white.
Looking back, his professional achievements remain just staggering and essentially unmatched. He holds the individual record for the most Academy Awards, securing 22 competitive awards out of 59 nominations. And if you include his special and honorary Oscars, the total rises to 26. He also won an Emmy Award for the Disneyland television series. The award shelf must have been enormous.
His cultural importance really defined much of the 20th century. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964 and the Congressional Gold Medal posthumously in 1968. Multiple Disney films, including Snow White, Fantasia, and Mary Poppins, have been named to the Library of Congress's prestigious National Film Registry. He took a minor, marginal form of communication, the animated short, and transformed it into a multinational leisure industry giant. It's an incredible trajectory. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, the overriding theme of his life seems clear. Almost every major creative and business leap he made was fueled by financial necessity or professional dissatisfaction. Losing Oswald led directly to the creation of Mickey Mouse and the strategic decision to always own the IP. The deep debt incurred after the 1940 features led to the financial genius of the ABC TV deal and the creation of Disneyland. He relentlessly used crisis as the ultimate fuel for massive transformative projects.
He was a man consumed by the idea of creating a controlled, modern, corporate utopia, fundamentally built on what he viewed as traditional American values. And he died before his final, greatest visionary project, the functional residential city version of EP Pauti, could be completed. This raises an important question, I think, considering how much of his empire was shaped by the need to overcome immediate crises. How might his entire cultural and civic legacy have been different had he lived long enough to oversee the construction and implementation of a genuinely functional community, rather than just another theme park? This is something for you to consider as you reflect on the man behind the myth.